Now available in paperback and Kindle, vampires stalk the darkness of the Eternal Night. Get your copy of Eternal Night in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com. I wanted to make a video on the Writers Guild of America strike of 2023 ending, but I wasn't in a place where I could make that video. I was busy dealing with some health issues, so I wasn't able to go out here and make that video earlier. But last week, the Writers Guild of America and Hollywood movie studios came to an agreement to end the 2023 Writers Guild of America strike that had crippled the entertainment industry over the last 5 months. And the agreement for 3 years basically gives writers everything that they wanted, including a raise in pay per episode to $11,000 a week, I believe. And they're also going to get higher percentages of residuals on secondary markets such as syndication and streaming. And they're also going to get assurances that the studios will not use AI to take away jobs from writers. And there will also be some changes to writers' rooms. I don't think they got everything that they wanted on writers' rooms, but the writers basically are going to be making a lot more money than they did under the previous agreement. Now, this entire deal was one that Hollywood really needed to go out here and get done because they were basically losing a lot of market share to social media platforms like YouTube. So they had to hurry back to the negotiations because both sides really were not getting the support from the public that they thought they were going to get. Since the days of the 2007 writers' strike, most of the audience out here hasn't really cared about television or movies. And as the audience has become more indifferent to television and movies, what has happened is Hollywood basically was in a place that Major League Baseball was in back in 1995. Now, back in 1994, how Major League Baseball's owners and players could not agree to a new contract, and they wound up going on strike. And as they wound up going on strike, they wound up not gauging the public, which had grown fed up with a lot of these players and who were making millions of dollars, and they were fed up with the billionaire owners and their lack of love for the game. And this whole strike basically made it where people became alienated from baseball, and because of the cancellation of the World Series in 1994. So that basically made it where both sides found themselves in a jam because the audience had stopped caring about baseball. Now, the same thing happened with Hollywood and the writers and the actors with this 2023 strike. Both sides wanted to go out here and try to get the public to get involved, but the public just didn't care. And because the public didn't care, what happened was people were not really getting upset about these TV shows and these movies not coming back. And both sides realizing that there was no public engagement. This is why they scrambled to the table to get a deal done, because they saw that the audience was not engaged in this strike and had just not cared. And in order to try to save some face, this is why they went out here and made this deal, because while the writers are getting a bump in pay, the studios were hemorrhaging billions of dollars in losses in comparison to the $70 million that one studio, Warner Brothers Discovery, would have made if they made a deal with the writers. I mean, Warner Brothers Discovery lost $500 million over the last calendar year over projects that were stalled, and many of these studios, which are drowning in debt and teetering on collapse, they realized they needed to get back to the table to settle this strike, or there wouldn't be a series of studios to entertain American audiences. Now, there are some YouTubers who want to say that this strike was strategic for the studios,
and it allowed them to get out of a hole that they had dug themselves in by speculating on streaming. Now, according to these YouTubers, what they're saying is that many of the studios went out here and gambled heavily on streaming, and when they saw that the numbers for streaming were not what they expected, what happened was they wanted to try to use the strike to go out here and be able to purge a lot of content that really wasn't pulling in the money. Now, as somebody who studied the entertainment industry for over 25 years, I've got to disagree with that talking point, and I have to disagree with that talking point because I know that these studios were in a very bad place even before streaming came around. Now, a lot of these studios, they were drowning in debt because of the heavy investment in the superhero movie genre and the market starting to go soft, and they were looking to try to gamble on streaming as a way to try to get what they thought was going to be a bigger audience because of Netflix's popularity. Now, the mistake that the studios made was not understanding the business model that Netflix had. Netflix was basically giving the studios money, and they were giving them money for the content they produced. So the studios were basically going out here making money on brand new content made by studio production companies. Moreover, they were also being paid by Netflix to go out here and broadcast many of their older films and TV shows on their streaming service. So the studios basically were making money the same way a syndicator goes out here and makes money. But many of the streaming services really didn't understand the business model as related to streaming because they really didn't understand the whole concept of syndication, a marketplace that made shows like Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, Star Trek The Next Generation, Xena Warrior Princess, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and Sinbad, very popular shows. The model for syndication, it works like this. Usually what you do is you make content with no-name actors with low budgets, and that's how you go out here and make your money selling this content. You sell these shows on low budgets and usually you cut costs like they did with Hercules by having most of the show filmed in New Zealand, or with Star Trek you have it filmed on sound stages with very low budget computer generated effects or model effects, and that is how you make your money on syndicated content. But what happened is you had executives like David Zaslav and Bob Iger who, as they were launching their streaming services, went out here and did not understand how to run a streaming service, and what they did was launch streaming services with big budget projects, and as they launched them with these big budget projects, they really didn't count the cost as related to the projects they were putting on their streaming services in proportion to the subscribers you would need in order to pull a profit. So what these guys did was they went out here taking big franchises like Star Wars and the MCU, making spin-off TV shows and spending big budgets on them. And as they spent big budgets on these Star Wars and MCU shows, what happened was these shows could not go out here and pull a profit for the streaming service. Even worse, what would happen is what happens at Netflix. People would subscribe to see a show, and once they finished seeing the show, they would cancel their subscription. So the entire business model was flawed from minute one, and this was the thing that really did the studios in, because they greenlit a lot of projects, tossed a lot of money at a lot of creators, not ever thinking about what they were investing in or what type of content they would need to maintain a functional and productive streaming service. This was the big problem that really plagued a lot of the studios, that had them at odds with the writers, because they had greenlit a lot of bad projects. A lot of projects were greenlit, like She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, and many other shows, without ever thinking about what audience was going to go watch these shows. No, they just thought, oh, it has an MCU label or a Star Wars label, but they really were not thinking about trying to find what audience was going to watch this content. No, they thought people were going to watch anything on streaming and thought there would be an endless supply of customers, not understanding that these customer bases are very small. And again, they were not going to be able to pull the profits that would allow them to be able to make these programs profitable. Now, they were spending $15 to $20 million on a Star Wars episode of a show like The Mandalorian, and possibly $20 million or so on shows like the MCU shows like WandaVision. And that was a mistake because, again, from the days of syndication, they basically, when they were doing episodes of Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, and Xena Warrior Princess, they were doing those shows for maybe $500,000 or $600,000 an episode, and in some cases like Power Rangers of maybe $500,000 an episode. So those shows, they would go out here in syndication and make big profits because, again, they had no-name actors, they had low-budget production values, and the special effects were just basic miniatures or models that didn't really cost a lot of money. But with the shows that were on streaming services like Disney Plus, they were spending a whole bunch of money on CGI effects, and that basically was the thing that broke the bank on these shows, because you would need at least the entire country and a couple of countries to watch these shows for them to pull any sort of profit if they could, because these shows cost as much as 2 or 3 big budget movies, and that's where the studios again made a major tactical error on streaming. They really didn't look at the models as related to their business or see if these models would be profitable to their business in the long term. Now, Hollywood had a long run of billion-dollar box office with movies like Avengers Endgame, and as the superhero movie genre peaked in popularity, many of the writers of these screenplays wanted to try to get better compensation than they received in the 2007 strike. Now, in the 2007 strike, writers basically made a lot of concessions as related to that strike, but in this one, they wanted to go out here and try to get better compensation because they saw these movies doing well. Moreover, they wanted to deal with the whole issue of artificial intelligence and try to prevent it from keeping writers from working. Now, this entire situation with the writers basically turned into this 5-month strike, and this strike really did a lot more damage than the studios have gone out here and said would be done. Now, again, some YouTubers want to say that the studios are at an advantage, but the studios are not really at any advantage at all. No, the studios have suffered a lot of losses, and those losses really started with the Telecom Act of 1996. The studios thought they could go out here and deregulate the entertainment industry by passing that legislation with the Republican Congress and Bill Clinton signing it, and this bill would allow them to go out here and buy more than one TV station, one newspaper, and one radio station and one magazine in an area. And what has happened over the last 20 years is that media has become so consolidated that what has happened is we don't have any sort of competition. And because there's no competition, there's no incentive to be creative. And what guys like Bob Iger and David Zaslav have been doing is buying up companies in order to mine old intellectual properties. And but what they don't understand is that intellectual properties depreciate. And as intellectual properties depreciate because the audience that knew them is getting older and dying, they're not making anything new and fresh for younger audiences. So that was the first tactical error that the studios made back in 1996. The second tactical error that they made was creating the legislation to make TV go digital in 2009, coming off a 2007 Writers Guild strike. This basically was one of the serious blows that did damage to American entertainment as a business, because with the consolidation of media stifling creativity and TV going digital, what happened was the audience that was captive to television and movies had no incentive to adapt to the technologies that they were being steered to. So what happened was the people out here were not interested in going out here and buying new digital TVs. No, instead of watching new digital TVs, they migrated over to the internet, and they migrated over to platforms like YouTube, and they started watching YouTubers like myself. And as they were watching YouTubers like myself, they were forming relationships with YouTubers they couldn't form with celebrities, and that's where Hollywood entertainment basically just wound up making the biggest tactical error, a tactical error that basically was exacerbated by the 2023 writers and actors strikes. The 2023 writers and actors strikes basically have really done more damage to Hollywood's entertainment industry, because what's happened now is that while they thought that people would be invested in Hollywood to the point where they would want to go out here and demand that they settle this strike, what happened was we got a lot of apathy, and the audience just didn't care about anything that was going on as related to this strike. And indifference is the kiss of death for entertainment, because if you can't stimulate an emotion in people with the entire entertainment industry, then the entire entertainment industry is in trouble. And that's the main reason why the strike wound up ending so abruptly with the writers. The strike wound up ending because the studios basically know that they are losing market share with every passing day. And with every passing day, what's happening is that they don't have any projects in production. And if they don't have any projects in production, they're going to lose the audience. And that's what's been happening over the last 5 months. The studios have basically lost more of the audience because they don't have any content, and they don't have any content for a 2023-2024 season. So what's happening is that while the studios don't have content, YouTubers like myself are producing brand new content every week or every day. And as we produce content every day, more people go to watch YouTube content than they do watching Hollywood content. And that's the main reason why the strike basically wound up ending. It had really nothing to do with any sort of thing as related to trying to reset, as related to much of the content they were producing on streaming. Yes, they did invest a lot in streaming, speculating that people would come to streaming, but the business models they had, again, were fundamentally flawed, and they were doing more damage because everything that's on streaming basically takes away ad dollars from television, where most of the money used to be. But TV's audience has been dropping, and they've lost 50% of their audience over the last couple of years because people are migrating to the internet, and they're migrating to content on channels like mine. They're coming to see YouTubers go out here and talk about different subjects, and they want to get to know people. And it's that ability to get to know people that is the reason why the YouTuber has become more popular than the movie stars and the celebrities, because there's a person you can get to know, and people who are just like you, something you used to be able to see in many TV shows, but you don't get to see it anymore because many of the studios, they do want to push agendas. But the reason why this strike wound up ending so abruptly is because Hollywood realizes how much market share it's lost over the last 10 to 15 years. Ever since TV went digital, they have basically been hemorrhaging viewers, and their streaming services are not going to be a way for them to regain those viewers, because a lot of these streaming services, they really don't know how to go out here and create content. And again, on the internet, content is king. on the internet, you have to have rock solid content in order to build or maintain an audience, and that's something Hollywood studio executives really not have gotten a good master on. Now, if I were running one of these streaming services like Disney Plus, or one of these streaming services like Paramount Plus, or one of these other ones out here, I would definitely wouldn't have been investing so heavily in MCU shows or Star Wars content. No, I would have wanted to keep that content special. Maybe do something with a character who is just far removed from the entire Star Wars lore and try to start something a little bit new. Again, something small budget, something that could be done very cheap, and something that could be done that you could ensure a profit. Moreover, I would have invested in some comedies or some other types of dramas. One of the things that I saw that was a weakness was that many of these streaming services were too heavily invested in fandoms and not really invested in bringing in the casual customer. That's one of the problems when I looked at many of these sites as related to their content. They really weren't focused on developing content for the casual customer, something like a nice drama, something like a sitcom, something that would appeal to other types of viewers. Not everybody was a comic fan or a sci-fi fan, and there should have been some other kinds of content on Disney Plus, maybe an animated show, maybe something that was something not related to any sort of fandom. And that was a major Achilles heel for many of these streaming services. They were not really focusing on the new customer. No, they were focusing on customers who were coming from older audiences and customers coming from franchises that had already peaked. And that's one of the reasons why we had the issues with streaming. That's something that they didn't really think about as they were greenlighting all of these projects. As they were greenlighting a lot of these projects, they weren't really thinking about what audience they were trying to sell to. And again, this exacerbated issues with the writer's strike and just shows me the entertainment industry is in a really bad place at this point. I mean, it's in a really jacked up place. Again, a lot of people are saying, oh, they're going to be making less shows. And that the problem, it doesn't matter how many shows you make. It matters if the audience cares. And again, yeah, some people on places like Comics YouTube, they're like, oh, many of these SJW writers are going to lose their jobs. But American entertainment is the big loser because many of these executives just don't have any sort of vision for where they want to take their platforms. Many of these executives like Bob Iger and David Zaslav still are caught up in their tunnel vision and really don't have a picture of what they want to present to audiences in terms of content. And yes, you may have fewer shows that do get greenlit and they may be made by seasoned writers, but the problem is that there's much of the content they're putting on is very bland and very uninspired, is not very creative, and that's why TV and film and streaming are losing. They're losing because they're not allowing the qualified talent to come in. I mean, guys like myself who have fresh ideas and fresh stuff. No, they went out here and hired a bunch of inexperienced people passively for diversity, but aggressively what they were trying to do was trying to go out here and say, oh, these people could not do the work. But the problem is that the content they produced alienated audiences, and the content they're producing doesn't give people an incentive to come back and watch. Now, that's all due to the mindset of many of these executives who think that they have a captive audience, but you don't have a captive audience because you have to compete against YouTube, and you have to compete against YouTubers like myself who are out here creating fresh content and creating fresh content from fresh perspectives. That's the big problem that Hollywood underestimated as related to the issues as these strikes. They thought that there was a captive audience, but there is no captive audience. And because they know that there's no captive audience, they're scrambling to, again, get to the table because they know that they've lost 50% of their TV audience. They've lost a good chunk of their movie audience, and streaming is basically a dead platform because, again, content is king, and the problem is that they're not making any type of content that really draws the customer in and makes the customer care. That's the problem I'm seeing with Hollywood as related to these strikes, and the aftermath of these strikes really is the thing that should trouble most of these people in the entertainment industry. Yeah, you're making less projects, and you're going to have less projects greenlit by a risk-averse Hollywood, but this is the time to take a risk, because you need to go out here and reach and appeal to the new audiences. You need to reach and appeal to new audiences with new characters and new stories. The thing is that one of the reasons why you're not doing well is because you have writers who are inexperienced going out here and hiring them, and also going out here taking depreciated concepts and trying to make them into assets, but the audience for those concepts is too old. So I look at the whole picture of Hollywood in the aftermath of these strikes, and while some say that the writers are going to be the losers, they're only going to be losers in the short term. The biggest losers in Hollywood will be the executives and the studios, and they will be the big losers at the end of the day, because their studio structure basically was weakened just that much further, and it was weakened by these strikes because, again, in order for a studio to be strong, there has to be an audience that cares about the product, and at this point, the audience doesn't care anymore, and if the audience doesn't care, you're basically on the road to going out of business if you're going out here making movies and television. If you cannot keep the audience engaged, well, the audience will walk away, and that's the problem with this strike, is that the audience has walked away, and the studios with movies and television have lost even more of their audience, and this is a tactical error that many of these studio executives will regret, because when you lose the audience, you've basically lost your ability to make money, and with no avenues for creativity in Hollywood, what's happening is that the industry will further contract until it implodes, and that's what's happening right now. It's in the middle of an implosion, and sadly, many people don't see the big picture about the entertainment industry because they're caught up in SJWs and what they call woke entertainment. But when you look at the business objectively, you see how bad the business is, and the business for entertainment in Hollywood had basically taken a major blow with this strike, because you may be able to get production back started with fewer projects, but the whole thing is there aren't many eyeballs watching Hollywood at this point. No, people are watching people on YouTube, and that's where Hollywood made the biggest mistake with this strike. Now, if you want to pick up many of my books on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the Steam series, the John Hayes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, my screenplay books all about Marilyn and all about Nikki, my black sorority novel, The Thetas, or my vampire novel, Eternal Night, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble. And if you'd like to see me make more videos like this about the entertainment industry, you can send a donation to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Give in to temptation and pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, all about Nikki, a fabulous first season. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air meets Clueless in this absolutely fabulous African-American 1990s teen sitcom. Get all 13 episodes of All About Nikki, the fabulous first season, in paperback and e-readers today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.